All right, it's Wednesday, so there's a brand new Guys radio show this evening at 8 p.m. Pacific time on KCAA radio here in sunny Southern California. 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. Tonight we're going to take a trip far across the universe with Secret Space Program survivor Tony Rodrigues, part 2 of my in-depth interview with Tony, his work on the moon, his work on Mars, and his other travels in the universe. It is a wild ride. You're going to want to join me on Guys Radio. You can also download or stream the show on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn Radio, Castbox. We're everywhere. We're worldwide. Maybe we're all over the universe or a parallel universe. I hope you can join us. Robert Manni here for Guys Radio. Thanks for your support.
It's Guys Radio. Here's your host, Robert Manni.
Welcome, everybody, to Guys Radio. This is your host, Robert Manni, hosting the show where men and women can be at their best and everyone wins. Guys Radio. Wow, we've got a great show today. Our special guest is Tony Rodrigues. He's joining us for part 2 in his discussion about the secret space program that Tony claims to have been a part of for what's called a 20 and back, where he was recruited as a 10-year-old into the secret space program. He did some training in the United States, went to the moon, did some more training, worked on Mars and Ceres, which is a planetary object that's close by to Mars, and worked in other areas in space, and came back and had a mind wipe and returned to his 10-year-old self. It's a mind-blowing story. You may have seen Tony as well as some other quote-unquote whistleblowers on Gaia, and the whole secret space program information is out there for everybody now. So what we like to do on Guys Radio, hey, we've talked about everything from sex to the Supreme Court and now the secret space program. I bring you information. You determine if it works for you. And my job is to just get that information out there in a way that's digestible, that's introductory in a way. I don't go too deep on subjects. I don't get into the machinations of the current political system right now, but I do get to issues, and I bring information out there for our listeners, for your edification, for your consideration, and then you determine what you want to do with it. I'm the conduit, though. I reach out to a lot of guests. A lot of guests are now reaching out to me, and we've got some sensational stories that we're going to share with you on Guys Radio. So, as I mentioned, Tony Rodrigues is our special guest today. We did an hour with him a couple of weeks ago. This is part 2 because to cover that 20-year period, it takes some time. A lot happened to Tony during his 20 years in the secret space program, from his training, some early abuse he experienced prior to his training. It's interesting about Tony that he wasn't recruited into the program as a kind of a leader, if you will, or as an empath. He was kind of a regular guy to be kind of used as cannon fodder, if you will, for the military and also just as a worker bee. So he comes to the program and comes to Guys Radio with a different perspective than some of the other quote-unquote whistleblowers that you may have seen on some of the shows about ufology that are on either traditional cable or Gaia and some other networks. But Tony's story is unique. I think everybody who listens to it can relate in a way, because just imagine how it would feel to be suddenly awoken and find out you are being transported into a program that you know nothing about, and for the next 20 years you're going to be serving in a capacity that you know nothing about, basically doing work for an operation that you know little about. You're on an as-needed-to-know basis, and it'll change and reshape your life and your perspective on everything. I think the most important thing I learned when I talked to Tony was that throughout all of this, throughout all of the abuse he experienced, he still maintains some spiritual aspect to his life. So that's a good takeaway, and I was really glad to hear that. So with no further ado, let's bring out our very special guest, Tony Rodrigues, and we're going to get into part 2 of his tales of his experiences with the secret space program.
Robert Manni's The Guy's Guide to Love is a fast-paced tale of flawed men and savvy women competing for love, sex, power, and money in the city where they play for keeps. It's the men's successor to Sex and the City. The Guy's Guide to Love is a sexy romp through the fast-moving, high-stakes world of Madison Avenue. Available now on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
All right, Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. As I mentioned, we're doing part 2 of a very special show. It's almost like a series now with the secret space program. We're going to talk to Tony Rodrigues again today. When we left off, we were talking about the secret space program. Tony did what's called a 20 and back. So 20 years of his life he gave to, I guess, our country and the alliance, or whatever you want to call it. Tony will explain it to us. And then he came back and he gets his mind wiped, basically, but he gets those years back. And like some other folks in the secret space program, Tony started to have, I guess, some flashbacks or some memories, and then things started to come together. So last time when we talked, Tony took us through how he was kind of, I'll say, quote unquote, recruited. He was kind of lured into the secret space program, kind of placed in it. Unlike some others who were recruited for specific roles, Tony was actually, I guess you could say, almost being punished by being put in there. He was sent to Seattle for a while, and then to, I believe, Peru. And then he went to the moon. Then he went to Mars. And we left off there where Tony had actually been used for some battles with some insectoids on Mars. He lost a limb, and the limb, through technology, grew back. It sounds like a lot. Let me just set this up before Tony gets on by saying, you know, on Guys Radio, I bring you information that I think is important to just hear about. You make the determination. If you believe it, if you don't believe it, if it's something you vibe with, whatever. If you go on Gaia, the cable network, there's a whole bunch of series on the secret space program. You can learn a lot about it, and then you can determine for yourself. I've got Tony on here today. He's going to get into more detail about what we talked about last time, and then it's up to you folks. So Tony Rodrigues, welcome back to Guys Radio. It's been a couple weeks, but I'm so glad you're here.
Hey, thanks for having me, Robert. Glad to be back. Due to scheduling, it was hard to get back really quick. So
No worries.
We had a good time last time and covered a lot of ground.
Good. So as I mentioned, where we left off, you were stationed on Mars. And you were being used for some battles where they'd send you and some other guys out to kind of test out how to deal with some of the locals, if you will. And in this case, the locals were like giant insects. In one battle that we discussed, you had lost a limb, and then I think the limb grew back. Let's start from there, and then just take us through kind of what happened in these ensuing months and years during the program for you. What was your experience?
Sure, I'll try to be quick about it. So we were a program that was a support soldier program. They were trying to get numbers. Rather than having soldiers that were very expensive and took a long time to train, they were trying to get guys that were less qualified to be to use a strategy that they could use and be combat effective. And so we were a support soldier. We did my program. I only did 3 missions, and then we had contact, where we had casualties, and I was wounded. I was carried back by soldiers back to the base. I lost consciousness at the doorway, and when I woke up, I had my arm and my foot back. And so I don't know the medical procedure that took place. It was kind of classified. My position in the programs was a need to know. Everybody asks, how did you not know that? Well, because I was technically, I was a slave. I was slave labor. And so they didn't have the need or the gumption to explain what was going on to me whenever they did something. So that happened quite a bit. There was a lot of technical stuff that I don't know because I just didn't need to.
Okay. You were aware, though, in the battle with these insectoids that you had lost a limb? Yes?
I was
Okay.
Very,
So then,
very, yes.
then you woke up. I guess you probably went into shock at that point. You woke up and your limb had been regrown
Yes.
or replaced somehow. Did you know how long? I know you were on a need-to-know basis, but as a human, did you ask questions like, "What happened? How long have I been here? What happened with my arm?" Were you allowed to ask that stuff, or you were trained
Sure.
like just to keep your mouth shut?
Yeah, well, I was debriefed after the fact, and they did explain that. I forget what they called it. They called the bed. The bed had a name, but they did explain that there were machines that basically put my arm back. And when I asked, how does that work? How do they do that? They just, don't worry about it and go. And so the medical area on the base was underground. The medical area and the armory, if you will, area were on the first floor. Basically that area. We were staying on the fifth floor down. It was 5 stories down, and that was like an administration. There was a cafeteria. The main cafeteria was there, and the administrative office. And so I didn't get a whole lot of time. I wanted to stay and look around in that area because that's where all the tech was. On that first floor, that's where the active personnel. It was an abandoned base, and all the people that were working there were there.
Okay.
But I spent probably, in terms of a morning, I was done by 9 a.m. They took me out of there.
Wow.
And went back.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about, just your day-to-day life there. You were, used for different missions, had some training. What was it? What were the quarters like? Did you have any type of socialization with the other folks who were doing the same things that you done? Was there men and women? Were there different races? Were there other entities that were part of the program that you worked with? Tell us about that.
So later on, after I had been, sold off to Ceres colony, it was like that. It was a bigger colony. And there were ETs, there were men and women. It was, it was more of a city area. That base on Mars was just soldiers and about a dozen or so guys like myself, and they kept us locked away. So after the program was canceled, we had a good 6 weeks of nothing. It was just lame duck. We didn't even have any work to do, and we wanted to do something we wanted to help out, but there was really nothing for us to do. We just kind of sat there and we had our meals.
Okay, now. Let me ask you this, Tony. So you went to Ceres. For our listeners, where is Ceres? How did you get there? How were you how did they kind of inform you as to, okay, guys, you've been sitting around for a couple of weeks now. We've got something for you. You're going to go here. How did that all take place?
So they said what happened was we stayed in that base for about 6 weeks with nothing to do. Then a small transport came. It had windows. We had to fly at a high altitude. They did not have air superiority. There were people flying on it that they were talking about that they hated flying because the airspace wasn't safe, that there were other programs and ETs that were dangerous for them to fly near. They flew us to a bigger city, and I want to say a capital city, and it was another underground area.
On Mars? Ceres is part of Mars then?
No. I'm explaining how I got to Ceres.
Okay.
We went to that other area. There was more civilians there. It wasn't a strictly military place, and I was retrained. So basically, I took aptitude tests. It was a tall white ET that we were all in a big room. It looked like a computer lab. We took aptitude tests, and they determined a job for me to do. And then I went through training for ship repair and just protocols on how to use various tools, and a lot of it was fire suppression classes. But anyhow, after that went on for a month or so, a couple months. I had my own place. I had my own little apartment. It had its own bathroom, which was luxurious to me compared to other places I had been up to this point. And one day, without any kind of briefing or warning, and instead of a lower ranked officer who came and got me every morning and took me to the school, the computer lab place, somebody else came and got me, a guy in plain clothes, and he took me somewhere. No, we're going this way. It's somewhere I'd never been before. We walked in. It was luxurious looking. I mean, the construction was artistic. It wasn't your basic, like the moon bases were very basic. The forward base that I was at was a very basic place. a little bit nicer than the moon. It looked more like an elementary school kind of construction, the base that was abandoned that I was on. Okay. But this, when he took me here, it looked more like a shopping mall construction. And we went in, and it was basically a train station. And we were waiting. There were hundreds of people there. And a train pulled in. It was blue. It was white and blue. It had dark blue stripes on it. We got on, and I believe this is the train that had the like a bar that came down over your lap. Mm-hmm. And it didn't look safe, but it was like some of those old roller coaster rides.
That's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm. It was exactly like that. It was exactly like that, and the seats were facing forward. There were civilians. There were guys in suits, fancy suits, and there were guys in uniform. There were soldier people. There were other younger guys like me. It was a pretty big, good-sized train, and it was packed.
Let me ask you a question. So the people who were around, just because I'm trying to, ask questions that if I was listening, I'd say, you know what?
Sure.
I wonder what that was like. So when you say there was people wearing suits and stuff, this is like suits and ties. Were they speaking English? Were there men and women?
Yes.
Was it like Western culture, or what was it like? Were they humans, all humanoids, or what?
Yeah, they were humans, and they were speaking English, and they were, they looked more like United States citizens, mm-hmm. but I don't think that they were strictly people from the United States. I think there was more of a global.
You think they were humans, or like
they were absolutely humans? They were absolutely humans, just like you and me.
All right.
Yes. So this was on Mars in the bigger city. So when the train started, it lifted off. It bounced up and was floating, and you could feel it because it got smooth. It rolled for a ways and then lifted, and then it went into a tunnel. And at some point, there was a static electricity, like a poof, a flash, and it was disorienting, where you would be a little dizzy. And then the train immediately started to decelerate, and it eventually got slow enough, and it went back onto the wheels and came out of the tunnel, and everybody got off. It was a very short ride, just a few minutes. And when we got off, the construction was back to being like on the moon, basic square construction, concrete, and not artistic like it was on Mars. And the dirt was different. There was dirt, and the concrete and everything was a completely different color, more of a gray color. And at this point, when I walked out, so they were giving us water after you went through that on that train. It depleted your electrolytes or something where you could get sick. You had to drink water, and so they had water there as soon as you got off. They gave us just a gulp. I remember being jealous of the people that were more like citizens. They were having like a good size amount of water that they could drink. But they just gave us a quick gulp because that's really all you needed for your electrolytes, some electrolyte problem. And we immediately went over to a hangar bay, like a big hangar, like right around the corner, where it opened up to, and it was full of soldiers, and it was like an orientation day for an army, and they were Germans. And this was on Ceres colony. And
where is that? Where is Ceres colony?
Ceres is a small dwarf planet that's in between Mars and the asteroid belt. It's right on the edge of the asteroid belt. It's a very small planet. It's only about 580 miles, I think, in diameter. And it has water. So there's a lot. It's spelled Ceres. Mm-hmm. It's pronounced Ceres, if anybody wants to look up. But the colony that I was there, I lived there for another at least a decade. I want to say about 12 years. But I lived there that long after that point of that first day. And what I discovered was that there were many towns that were built all around the interior of the planet, and they're all connected by trains.
Okay. All right. It's Guys Radio. Your host, Robert Manni. We've got Secret Space Program survivor, Tony Rodrigues, with us. We're talking about his time. Now he's on Ceres. So looking back from Mars, I guess it seemed to you, and it must seem like it is now, that there's a lot of things going on Mars right now, and it sounds like there's a lot of things going on Ceres. When we talk about disclosure and stuff, I just saw in the paper yesterday where they're saying, they actually found signs of life on Mars, and it was like buried in what I was reading. It wasn't like page one or anything like that. So it seems like they're trying to get the word out there. But so all the stuff, to your knowledge, is still going on, correct?
Yes, Right.
Okay.
And when at the time that I left was right around the year 2000 when I went back, and Ceres Colony was under heavy construction. It wasn't just a few projects here and there. They were heavily constructing new buildings.
Okay. What are they doing?
Caverns.
So what's going on there?
Well, it's an entire colony. It's its own society in itself. It's a breakaway colony. The Ceres Colony Corporation.
Okay. And what do they do? And did they interact with Earth? Or they interact more with beyond Earth, or are they doing trade deals with our planet now? Yes to all of the above, or what?
Yes. So we routinely picked up cargo at a place called Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean. We also dropped cargo off to underground places in Antarctica and in South America, and we would pick up cargo and take it and trade it with ET species and vice versa. Basically, when they needed raw materials or goods, we would go to Diego Garcia and they'd load them up. There were times they needed military equipment and things for support nature that they would trade, with other species, other planets, and we would go there and load it up. There was a manifest, it was all tallied, but it's a story in itself, but I don't think they were paying for it. I think that, our Black Ops money is paying for that.
Okay.
It's covered.
Now, when you say they were Germans, there's been a lot of reports, if you will, about after World War II, there was a breakaway. Forces from Germany went to Antarctica, made some deals with aliens, reptilians, and have been kind of flying around in the universe and creating, their own destiny, if you will, and controlling a lot of things that are going on down here. Were you being told about this? Did you surmise this? Could you guys talk to each other? How'd you kind of put the pieces together?
Well, that was exactly the situation. So they referred to Antarctica as the high command, and throughout the solar system, not the entire solar system, but throughout the solar system, there are German colonies. And the Ceres colony was one of the more advanced ones. The Germans originally had found ruins there, an abandoned base that some other ETs had built long ago, and started to convert them to more human-looking structures. I have some artwork that I had artists do for a few places there in Ceres Colony. But and they coincided. They lived there with two full-time species that were inhabitants of Ceres Colony. Other ETs. One was like a 9-foot tall humanoid, 9 feet, and then really wide hips. And then the others were about 7 feet tall, and they were skinny with different proportioned, bigger eyes and different proportioned arms. And they tended to do all of the ship maintenance. I think that they were trading technology with those species, and they were, for whatever, I wasn't privy to the arrangements that were made.
So did you report into, I'm sorry to interrupt, did you report into ETs or humanoids, or and did you get your orders telepathically, or was it verbalized, or how did you guys communicate, and who was communicating with you?
Well, so I worked on a couple different ships while I was on Ceres Colony. One of them, I was just down in the bottom of it. It was an old submarine that was converted into a starship, and I was just maintenance with a few other guys that were basically slaves like myself. So I didn't have any privy, and that went on for my first 8 years until that ship was decommissioned. I was promoted and became a cargo engineer and put on a more modern ship that looked more like a seed, like pointed at the front and rounded at the back. And that one, I did get to the point where I was in mission briefings, but they would speak in German, and they had translator technology. They could flip a switch, and I could understand what they were saying, and vice versa. I did not learn German, and they did not quit speaking. They didn't learn English to speak with me. They could flip a switch, and there were areas of the ship where the translator tech was always on. We would go to Jupiter. We would go from Ceres Colony to Jupiter, and that's how they would make contact with other species. Kind of like a bulletin board system where they would see what was listed for sale or what was available, and they would go. Then we would fly there and try to make an arrangement. And our ship's mission was to trade for technology, goods for tech. Was the ship's mission? Period. They were trying to get advanced technology by any means necessary. So
what were they trading? Raw minerals or things like that, or gold, or what?
Everything they could get.
People.
People got traded. We did intercept. We stole people from one colony to the other. They traded pharmaceuticals. But at the end of my stay, they had converted a huge area that was like a storage, like a warehouse area off of the hangar. They had converted that to huge centrifuges that were mixing up chemicals to make pharmaceuticals because they had found something that was valuable to a certain market. They had found a market for it.
Okay. Beyond the trade, was there any? Did you notice in your time any altruism going on, or was it all about greed? Was it about making the universe and the planet a better place, and anything that was quote unquote humanitarian, or was it strictly trade?
It was strictly, my ship's mission was strictly trade. There were times when we did support things. There was warfare, and there was a time when we ran support. We took supplies and we would drop them off in the dead of space near the Orion Nebula, near the trapezium in the Orion Nebula. We would go there and we would take boxes and just put them out into space where they would sit there, and another warship would come and pick them up. And we did that for quite some time. There was a war situation. We were a support group for a fleet, a military operation.
Okay. So now you're a young guy and you're going through all of this. What were you thinking and feeling when you had the reality of like, wow, this is not what I was expecting when I got into this program? I mean, what was it like?
I was in shock the first couple weeks that I was on Ceres. When I went from Mars to Ceres, that was the first I had been told about any kind of train, any kind of transport like that. I hadn't been told. I just got on it and rode there and popped out on another planet. I was completely in shock and completely, disoriented from the whole thing, from the whole move. So what happened was they took me to an area where basically it was like I was with thousands of other guys. I had my own little cell. It was like a prison, but it wasn't. There was no door. There was no bars. I could come and go if I had somewhere to go. I could come and go as I pleased, as long as I showed up to work.
Was there places to go? Did there places to socialize? Did you have alcohol? Did you have women? Did you have gambling? Did you have sports? Did you have movies?
All that was there, but I was a slave. So I was a lower. So later on, when I did get the freedom to move about and I did explore the colony and go to places, when I went to the nicer areas, it was very humiliating to be a lower caste person of that society. Like I did not want to go to. You take a shopping mall. And, I was a slave. I wore a collar. I had a suit that was it was obvious. And people would just push you to the side. Like, not everybody was mean, and a lot of people were decent, but there was, now and then, it was like I was subject to being, if I was waiting in line and somebody else, get out of here, go to the back of the line, and then go to the back of the line. And go, like, it was humiliating. So I avoided that. There was a red light district. I ended up going there and being welcome because there were other slaves there that were sex workers. What I wanted to say was that my very first day, so after I got off the train, the next day they screwed up, and instead of putting me on the train from the barracks where I was to the hangar to report to my ship, nobody recognized me or knew what I was. I got mixed in, and I ended up going to the mines. I went with the rest of the guys that were miners, and I worked a day. My very first day there, I worked a day in the mine. They were looking, I remember asking them, I was okay with it. I looked around thinking I could do these jobs. And it was a very advanced mining process, but it was dirty, and there was a lot of manual labor. But they had machines that were, they had a machine that there was a red light would come on when they fired it, just so people knew. And a red light would aim it. But, there was a laser that aimed where it was, but that was just for aiming. It wasn't actual, it was a ultrasonic or something. Got it. Some kind of thing that would pulverize the rocks and bring down the wall, but they would mine in the microgravity and then clear out those rocks in the microgravity and then quickly install an archway support and then gravity plating flooring. Okay.
Let's fast forward just due to time. I want to make sure we get your whole story out here. So you were there for 10 years or so. How did you kind of you get to the end, getting towards the end of your time do you put in, the 20 and back? What was that like, and how did the program end for you, and then how did they do the kind of turnover back to Earth?
So I had done well for myself as a slave. from the point of having no freedom and absolutely no friends or any kind of relationships. It was the very first 8 years were miserable for me socially. I had done well and I advanced to the point where I had girlfriends, I had friends, and I was able to move around. I had places that I went. What happened was we were on a mission, and it was a combat situation, and I disobeyed a direct order, and I was demoted. In my last 6 months or so, I instead of demoting me and taking me off my job that I did, they gave me another job. So the ship would go out, we'd work our 8-hour day, and when we got back into the hangar bay, I had to stay there and keep working and do another job, which was manual labor of moving the cargo around. It was brutal. I didn't get a lot of sleep. They cut me off of any money. I couldn't travel anywhere. I did that. I went straight to bed, and that was my last 6 months. It was a custom there that everybody knew. The people that were in a 20 and back that were going back a lot, everybody knew about it. Not everybody. The local Germans were not in that situation. They lived there, and they did 20 and backs themselves, but they stayed there. Their service kind of continued. So it was a custom that the last, some guys got it a couple weeks, but the last few days that everybody would do your work for you to give you your last couple days there, they knew you were going back, and they would announce it, and everybody would do your job for you so that it was easy. And I didn't get any of that.
All right. So it's Guys Radio, your host, Robert Manni. We're talking to Tony Rodrigues of the Secret Space Program. Great discussion here. It's really mind-blowing. So I hope you're enjoying it. So, Tony, now that you're going to go back, you're at the end. What happens? How does that work?
So quite a bit happened. So at that time, I had a girlfriend, and I was madly in love with her, and I did not want to leave. And so my time came, and again, being demoted, I didn't get to see her and say goodbye. And so I was thinking of ways to stay. I was thinking of hiding out or going somewhere and trying to stay there longer, but it was absolutely not possible to do. An officer came and got me one morning. I got ready to go, like I was going on the train to work, and an officer was waiting there. There was like a gateway that that went from the locker room area. There was a cafeteria when you came out of there, where all of us were, the slave labor. And there was a gateway you went through that was where the trains would get you. And there was an officer waiting there, and I went with him, and we rode on a separate train and went to an area of the hangar, and then we walked along a long catwalk, and he talked about me. He kind of, he told me that I had no business disobeying the orders, and we talked about the incident. And he said not to worry about it. And I said, I'm going to remember this. You guys I'm not going to be one of the ones that forget. I'm going to remember this. I want to remember this. And he said, look, go back to your life and forget about all this. He's like, find yourself a good German woman and settle down and have some kids and just live a quiet life, a peaceful life, and don't worry about any of this. It's just going to be trouble if it's to be a nuisance to you. And he's, that was like the last few things he said to me. And then he put me on a disc. I walked across an umbilical, and it was a disc. And there was a human German pilot and a reptile pilot. And I went in the disc. You could see the engine room, and then you go around, and the cockpit was to the left, like on the lower part of the disc. And there was a staircase that went up to a circular room that was the top of it. It was a big circular room. And there was another 8 or 10 guys like me that were going back to the moon that were on their return. And that was like a good 6-hour flight. It was an older craft, so it was slower. And it was a good 6 hours, 7 hours back to the moon. And I remember pacing. It was carpeted. It was grimy. And I remember pacing back and forth thinking, I'm telling myself, I'm not going to forget this. I'm not going to forget. I'm going to remember. I'm going to remember. And I remember that was kind of like how I went back. And then one of the guys wasn't from Ceres colony. He was from another colony and kind of connected on that flight. He was an African American, or he's a black man, and he said he was cursing at the pilot. He was yelling, and I said, "Whoa, calm down! You're going to get in trouble." And he said, "What are they going to do? They have to put us back by law. Today is the day. They have today to put us back by law. So there's nothing they're going to do. They're not going to pull me aside and hurt me. They're not going to do anything to me." And he said, "You hear me down there? You hear me?" And he was yelling at him, and I kind of took that to heart. So when we got back to the moon, I don't know what it was. They had some kind of tech where they could put you in a hypnotic state, And so when I left the disc, I was kind of in a hypnotic state, and then would wake up where they were giving me procedures. It was like a big room. It was a big series of rooms. Think about it like a doctor's office. When you go to a doctor's office, they have a bunch of connecting rooms and a few hallways about that size. And in each room there was a machine. They were open towards each other, but they had machines that would program you. There were different ones, and that's what Jason Rice referred to as parting gifts. And they were giving you. There was one that it made you forget everybody's face that you saw while you were there. They were specifically targeting that area of your brain, those memories.
Okay.
Just the faces. So most of the faces you think back, you see a blur in the memory. There was another one that they tried to program. It was subliminal or subconscious programming, where if you saw a spaceship or if you encountered a UFO, that you would see a pirate ship. That you would associate things that when you started to remember, they would associate things like a Peter Pan ship.
Okay, so then in terms of the aging, so you had aged along this. Now, you had mentioned in our first show that you think that they used a clone version of you, and then they took your consciousness and then put it back into the Tony that you were. Is that correct? Okay.
Okay, so at that time of that procedure where they were deleting memories, there were different versions, different areas, different memory types that they were deleting. So you would go to one machine and go through a process, and then go down there. This was before the age reversal. So at the time, I would have been 30 years old, in my body that I was. And I was combative during that process. They told me to sit up the stairs. I said, no, I'm not, screw you. And, but I did, but I was combative about it. I did not want to go through it. And at some point then after going through that, and then more like intense medical examinations, medical procedure, they took me and put me on a table and then they put like black styrofoams around like a small wall around me. And I was told to sit very still, that if I moved, it could cause permanent damage, that that you could hurt your back and be crippled. That's even if you flinch. So I had to remain very still. And then they gave me drugs, not muscle relaxers, but muscle neutralizing drugs where you couldn't move.
Okay.
And that went on for a long time, weeks, where every day they came and gave injections all over me, like in your legs, and it was painful.
Right. And then, so you get out of that, and then where are you after going through this process?
After a few weeks of that, they rolled me into a machine, and it felt like I got incinerated. It felt absolutely like I got burnt, like in an oven.
Okay.
And then I woke up. After that, I lost consciousness, and when I woke up, I was back in my 10-year-old body on the moon, and I had no memory.
Okay. Now, were your parents around and like the whole thing?
No. I was in a lab. I was still in the same place.
Okay.
But I was back in time.
All right. So then where did
back in that body?
Okay. So where did they? And forgive me, I don't mean to interrupt. I just want to make sure we get as much as possible. So then they. How did you get back to, like, you're 10 years old? How'd you get back home, if you will?
Well, again, so after the point that I was back in my younger body, and that's why I say it makes sense that it was cloning, because they had killed that clone off, and those memories were gone, put my consciousness back in my original body, and I had all those memories waiting for me. All of a sudden, I had memories of mom and dad again.
Okay, and then were your mom and dad there, and that was just like it was the next day, or what?
No. So, and then more procedures happened. There was actually a lot that happened there, but if you want me to cut to the point where I woke up, basically, they knew I was going to remember, and they were going to do surgeries on me, but they couldn't find my records to sign off on, so they said, there's no record. We can't get in trouble for it. Just put him back. And then again, to the hypnotic state, and I woke up the next morning in my bed, back in my room, back in 1980. Back in 1980. I looked over, all my toys were laying on the floor, and I was back to being a kid. And I got up, and I had that sensation like I had it. It literally felt like I hadn't been there in 20 years.
Okay.
It was that sensation.
Did you feel, Tony, when you woke up and you were 10, that you were really 10 again, or did you feel like you had been through something and you were physically 10, but you really weren't 10?
Absolutely. I was completely changed. I don't want to say, so I had the same memories. I had the same kind of thought processes. I didn't have knowledge of what I'd been through, but I had the emotional baggage.
All right. So this Guys Radio, once again, Robert Manni, your host. We're here with Tony Rodrigues of the Secret Space Program. We're getting into some details here. I'm not going to get in trouble for this. I'm not going to have reptilians chasing me around now. Am I, Tony?
I think the cat's out of the bag these days. This is like the first time this has ever been said. I think a lot of people have come forward with this, so you're safe.
All right, thank you. So, and our listeners are safe too. So, okay. So when did you kind of realize that you had been through something? You said you were telling yourself for whatever reason, I'm going to remember, and I guess you did remember at some point. So how did that all come about?
Okay, so, a few, not long after, so there was there were weird things that happened, but they had never erased the memory of waking up with the original gray in my face. The moment that I was taken, those memories never got erased. Those were always there. I always remember that, and I couldn't figure out what happened after that. How many people have you heard abduction stories? They say they had contact, they saw something, and then they don't remember what happened. Something happened, I don't remember. Mm-hmm. That feeling was always with me. I always knew something happened at that point. As I got into my teen years, I started to remember more. I always remember the house in Seattle and those. It was kind of like as it happened for the clone on the same timeline, I would also remember this.
Got it.
And then later on, after it was over, so exactly about it was 18. So there was a time travel aspect that's complex, but after the 20 and back was over, in my real life, I woke up one day and kept saying to myself, and I didn't know why I said it, but I kept saying it's over, and I felt like $1 million. I felt for the first time kind of like I had my head on straight. Those 20 years, I had problems. I had emotional problems, and I didn't know why.
Sure.
And so those years, and I would always dream about things that I saw, and then in the daytime remember them, but it didn't make any sense to me. They were very powerful memories, but it didn't make any sense, so I just brushed them off and told myself they were dreams.
Okay. So then when did all of this aggregate to the point where you said it all came together, like you started really having, I would assume you had some vivid memories, and you now, because you're recounting everything now, when did that occur, and what did you do? How did you feel? And then what did you do about it? And how did you get to like where we are now?
Sure. Every couple of years I would poke my head up and do some research into ufology, and I would look for something that would look for something that I remembered happening that would correlate with and I never found anything. Most of ufology had nothing to do with what I had been through. Mm-hmm. And so then I would go away for a few years, and I always had the memories. They would build upon, and they just didn't make sense. And they weren't a dream, because I could remember in the memory, I can remember getting up that day, brushing my teeth, going there on a train, doing my job, going back to my bed. And I remembered all of that. That's not a dream, at that point. But I told myself, when could I have done this? Because I had a chronological memory of my life living here in Michigan. So it was in April of 2015, I was having bad headaches, and I went to the doctor, and she prescribed an MRI scan. And so I got an MRI scan of my head done. Mm-hmm. And about 2 weeks after that, coincidentally, I saw Randy Kramer's first interviews on exopolitics, and he explained the 20 impact tech, and I thought, that's what happened. It was 20 years, and they put me back. I said, they didn't take me for a night. It was 20 years. And when I accepted that, and I thought, that happened, then the same way that you recall your birthday party when you were 15, right now you can't think of it, but if somebody tells you a specific, then more memories will come. Mm-hmm. The same exact experience happened. Once I entertained it, said that was real. The rest of it came in big chunks, big years at a time, months at a time, worth of memories would just like hit me. And that went on for 3 to 6 months, where I was getting huge recall, and I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. And
so that was my next question. So what happened? Like, how did you had this to yourself, and you're probably wondering, like, what do I do with this? Should I talk to anybody? It must have been some trepidation and fear. How did it all come out then for you?
I was really scared. My wife at the time didn't believe in ETs. If there were ETs, they'd be in the Bible, kind of thing. And so there was really nobody to talk to, and I really wanted counseling. I knew that this was something of magnitude that was going to derail my day-to-day, and I wanted to get some counseling, and I knew counseling was only going to end in medication that I didn't want.
Right.
That there was no formal counseling that was equipped to deal with what I remembered, with the amount of it. So I got on and I contacted some researchers, and then basically I was grilled for over a year, just questioned. And in the beginning, the memories were very vague. There was a lot of things, like I remembered a lot of it, but there were a lot of memories that I didn't remember.
Who were Who were the researchers that you got? Were they military or was it?
No, ufology. Ufology.
Okay.
Right. So, and what happened was back then there were other whistleblowers coming forward, and so a lot of the things that would have vetted me easily had already been said about the space program. Mm-hmm. So it's not like I came out and said there's a train that transported me from Mars to Ceres. That had already been said by somebody else. So it was really hard to. What it was the submarines. I was the first one to remember the submarines that had been converted into spaceships, and I described the inside of it pretty good to the researcher, and that's what led him to keep working with me. What happened was instead of getting, I wanted to talk to somebody else that had gone through it just for the counseling factor. Instead of that, I was offered to do an interview, and I did, and then it's taken its own life since then. I've done.
Did you get any type of because some of the other folks who've come out, they've been followed and they're in fear and they've had some issues. How about yourself? Did you get any warnings like you better not talk about this or that or whatever? Are you at liberty, or do you feel comfortable talking about any of that stuff? I don't want to get you in trouble, and I don't want to get anybody else in trouble, but just curiosity.
I had an ET visit. I had some military personnel contact me, and I was taken and interrogated once. And then I've had a lot of flybys. I've had the experience quite a bit of going out in my yard and looking up at the stars in the sky on a clear night, and one of the stars just fly away.
What did the ET say to you when you had the ET visitation? What was that all about?
Okay, so this is and this is something I really don't like talking about a lot. It was in the beginning, and because it involves other people that.
Well, I don't want to get you or anybody else in trouble.
To make a long story short, it was standing outside my door in the morning, right when I was waking up, and it was a telepathic communication. And basically, it asked me by coming forward and speaking about my memories publicly, what was my intention? Mm-hmm. And my answer was, and when I was talking to him, it wasn't like me talking. It was,
you're like higher consciousness.
Like higher, exactly. And the communication felt like this. Instead, imagine if I were talking to you and I said, "What did you do last month?" Mm-hmm. Right? You would rattle off, there was a time I tried a new recipe, we went shopping, we did this, we did a trip. That's how fast the data would communicate. This communication was much different when he asked, kind of like, what did you do last month? The entire month was instantly downloaded, like instantly there. Like he was taking years of data out of me as we communicated. That was the form. The telepathic communication was much more data than we could talk. It was years at a time, quickly. Mm-hmm. And I was able to communicate back like that. And what I said was, look, it's wrong what they did to me, and it's wrong what they did to her, and I'm going to let people know. That's what I said back to him when he asked me what my intention was. And then he showed me the future. He showed me things and said that I would be safe to talk about it until I got exhausted of it, until I was tired of it.
Okay.
And then he left.
All right.
And there was a mushroom circle left in my lawn. Where I was standing, I took a picture of it. About 2 days later, there was a circle of mushrooms that popped up.
All right. Well, I only have, it's such a fascinating story. We could go on and on and on, but we're out of time. So what's the one thing that you want people to know about the whole secret space program in your experience?
Well, I can tell you right now, they're going to have to disclose. They're going to disclose to us. The beginning of it is going to be a slower, watered-down version of what's really out there, I believe. That's me guessing. It's just my opinion. Mm-hmm. They're going to disclose, and just so you know, it's very advanced. The space programs out there are beyond what a Star Trek is. The universe is not small. There's not 5 or 10. There's not 900 species. There are billions of species out there at all billions of different levels of technological advancement and spiritual advancement. And that's what's really up there. That's what's up there. And so whatever they disclose is just going to be an ends to a means to them finally being able to tell us that. And I expect them to lie to maintain an advantage.
Sure. Okay. Last question, just a yes or no. Do you feel, based on all the stuff that's happened, are you a spiritual person?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Tony Rodrigues, I want to thank you so much for being on Guys Radio. Maybe we can do it again. I had to squeeze a lot out of you today, and you were fantastic. So thank you so much. I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners learned a lot. God bless you, and stay safe. And it's a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for being so forthright and so articulate about your experience. And I really, when I saw you on Gaia, I felt for you that like this guy's been through a lot. So all the best to you, my friend.
Thank you. It's therapy to talk about it. It's a great opportunity. And thanks to everybody that's listening.
Okay. I hope we gave you a safe place here to talk. Tony Rodrigues, Guys Radio.
Robert Manni's The Guy's Guide to Love is a fast-paced tale of flawed men and savvy women competing for love, sex, power, and money in the city where they play for keeps. It's the men's successor to Sex and the City. The Guy's Guide to Love is a sexy romp through the fast-moving, high-stakes world of Madison Avenue. Available now on Amazon and wherever books are sold.
All right, Robert Manni here. We just had a series of interviews with Tony Rodrigues of the Secret Space Program that was mind-blowing. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I hope you keep an open mind about it. As Tony was saying, most of this information has already been out there, and you see it in dribs and drabs. Sometimes you see it in the back of a newspaper about, hey, they found something that looks like life on Mars, before the sports section or whatever, but tucked in the back, not on page one. And there's a lot going on that I think we would all agree that we probably don't know everything that's going on. So there's a lot of stuff happening out there that we're not aware of. So let's just all keep an open mind. And you make your own determination. You might say, that's a bunch of nonsense, what Tony had to talk about. And you might say, hey, wow, there are things going on. And eventually in our lifetime, we're probably going to meet some ETs. And they're going to show up. So might not be a bad thing. Could be a really good thing. We'll see what's going on. Anyhow, Guys Radio, we bring you it all. We bring you sex, the Supreme Court, and the Secret Space Program. So the show all began with my novel, which is the source material, The Guy's Guide to Love. You can pick up the novel on Amazon. It's about two guys in advertising competing for love, sex, power, and money in New York City, the city where they play for keeps. I started blogging a few years ago on my website, robertmanni, MANNI.com. There's over 300 blog posts there on everything about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness through the Guys filter, if you will. We began podcasting Guys Radio a few years ago, and then we expanded onto KCAA every Wednesday evening. They replay the show also on Sunday afternoons at 2 p.m., but we're on Wednesday evenings, 8 p.m. Pacific time, 102.3, 106.5 FM, 1050 AM. You can also download, stream, and listen whenever you want on Spotify, iHeart, Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, Blog Talk Radio, CastBox, KCAA, and robertmanni.com. If you want to support the show, all you need to do is listen, and if you can, pick up a copy of my novel, maybe rate, subscribe, or review the podcast version on iTunes/Apple Podcasts. That really helps. And spread the word. Guys Radio, we're here for you. I'm bringing you all the information I can to enrich your lives and get you thinking about other stuff, because I know how busy everybody is making that money, taking care of their family, doing their thing. So Guys Radio, I thank you for listening. I hope that you'll be back with us next week. We're going to do something completely different as we do every week on Guys Radio. And until then, like I always like to say, guys, finish first.
It's Guys Guy Radio.